Welcome to Slaying Excel Dragons video number 15. These are the videos that accompany this book. We are in chapter 5, and this is incredibly exciting. My favorite video to shoot in this whole book, because we're going to talk about 8 types of cell references. Now, really, this video is about the 4 main types of cell references: relative, absolute, and 2 types of mixed cell references. Now, why am I so excited about this video? Because in my opinion, I've been teaching Excel for a long time. And this video and the concepts in this video are literally the dividing line between people who are really good in Excel and just ordinary. Not only that, but it's one of the hardest concepts quarter after quarter that I teach. When I teach this concept of not just relative and absolute, but mixed cell references, people just have a hard time with it. OK, so I've tried to put together a bunch of examples in this video to make it not so hard. Now, we're going to start over in Excel, the workbook Excel is Fun Start. And of course, you can download this by clicking on the link below the video. We're going to start on this sheet CR1 for cell reference 1. Now, wait a second. I want to go over and look at a page in the textbook. And I want to look at a summary of cell references right off the bat. Let's see what page. It's 156. Here, there it is. Page 156, formulas and functions. Let's first just name the 8 different types of cell references, and then I'm going to show you a great summary, a 2-page summary that'll help you when you're having a hard time learning about these cell references. Now, so far in this book, we've only talked about cell references as formula inputs. We have talked about relative cell references. That means when you copy them, the cell reference is moved. And we have actually done that a number of times. But we're going to learn about absolute cell references, mixed cell references with row locked, also known as row absolute, column relative, mixed with the column locked, also known as column absolute, row relative. We'll look at worksheet cell references, workbook references, and even the amazing 3D cell reference. Hey, now that's only 7. Actually, we have already talked about what's called table formula nomenclature. That was back in chapter 3. So there's 8 different types of cell references. Now, page 156, right at the bottom. This one right here, there's a description and a summary. Relative, there's a description and summary of absolute. On the next page, summary of mixed, the 2 types of mixed cell references. And then at the bottom, this is kind of my trick that helps me when I'm having a hard time decide what type of cell reference goes into the formula. These 2 questions. Now, we're going to build up in these examples. We're going to do a few simple examples and build up, and then we'll conclude this video with an example of how to use these 2 questions to create any formula you want, no matter what type of cell reference is required. Let's go back over to our Excel workbook, CR1. All right. We're going to start off by talking about relative cell references. Oh, we've already done this a few times. I'm going to type an equal sign. That's the character that says, hey, I'm doing a formula. Now, we can either take our mouse or use our arrow keys. Because the cell references are close, I'm going to left arrow twice, a minus sign, and left arrow once. Now, this formula is not read equals B2 minus C2. That's not the way Excel sees it. And the reason why is because we're going to copy this down the column. All right, I'm going to prove to you that this is not equals B2 minus C2. Control Enter, and I'm going to drag it down 1. Click here and hit F2. Doesn't say B2 to C2. It says, what? The 2 changed to a 3. No problem. That's beautiful. The way you really read this is 2 cells to my left minus 1 cell to my left. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Double clicking that fill handle with your angry rabbit. Double click, sends it down as long as there's something to the left in our case. Now I'm going to click in the last cell and hit F2. There it is. It is not B2. It is not B7. If you want to become good at formulas, every time you do this and you're copying your formula, you just automatically see it the way Excel sees it. Relative to me, the formula. I'm the formula. I'm always going to look 2 cells to my left minus 1 cell to my left. All right, let's go to our next sheet. Now we're going to learn about absolute. I'm going to click on the sheet CR2. Now, in this situation, I'm actually going to zoom in. We're going to use this formula input and all of these as formula inputs and make a sea of formulas here. I'm going to highlight, right, like that. And now I'm going to use our keyboard shortcut to zoom in. Now, I could go View, Zoom to Selection, but I'm going to use my Alt keyboard shortcut. I just have this one memorized because I do it so often. Alt-WG. All right, let's click right here. Ooh, our goal is we have a retail selling price by margin. This is a 45% margin, 50, and 55. These are our set prices. And we just automatically want to increase every single one of these and put all the new prices over here and increase by 5. Actually, it's going to be point. That's not correct in the book. It shows 1.015. So 1, in essence, remember we talked about this last video, that's the percentage change. That's the original principal amount. So it's if you're adding a percentage format, it would be 1.5. We need to increase all of these by 1.5% or 0.015. All right, let's click right here and do our formula. Equals, and then I'm going to arrow, 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 times, and now I'm going to click down here. I did arrow, arrow, arrow because that was a close cell reference, but I used my mouse because that one was far away. All right, now that formula will work for this cell. These are all relative cell references. Now I want to see how to copy this formula down and see what happens. This will be the first time that we actually copy a formula and all the cell references are not relative. So now I'm going to copy it down. Actually, hit F2. That says the blue box right there. This one says the green box right there. Let's just go ahead and Control-Enter and copy it down. Don't double click, just copy it down 1. And then I'm going to click right here and hit F2. Now, let's look at the colored boxes. That's called rangefinder. Is the blue one in the right place? Well, yeah, we moved down from sofa to headlamp. So this was the original price at 45%, and we're trying to increase it by 1.5%. So the blue boxes look in the right place. But what about the green one? Notice relative cell references are always relative to me, the formula. So this green box is really 1, 2, 3 to my left, and always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 below me. So notice this is not the cell reference. We actually wanted, as we copied the formula down, that green box to be locked on that B11. All right, so I'm going to click here and F2. Notice it says B11. Enter. F2. The B11 turned to B12. And I didn't want it to turn to B12. All right, so going down, we see there's a problem. The 11 turned to a 12. Now, let's do it this way. All right, ready? I'm going to point to my fill handle and click and drag. Click in the cell and hit F2. All right, now, the blue box, it is in the correct cell. That is the starting price, and we need to increase it by 1.5%. What happened to the green one? What's so nice about rangefinder is you can visually see it is looking at the wrong cell reference. What did we want? We really wanted the green box to be locked on B11. So watch this. F2, that B11, tab F2, turn to C11. So really, back over in this cell right here, going this way, we need to tell this cell reference, hey, B, which is a column reference, don't change to C. And as we go down this way, I want to tell that row reference, which means row 11, right? I don't want it to change to 12. All right. So how do we do that? We convert it to an absolute cell reference. Now, way back in the beginning of the book, I mentioned the essence of Excel is that it has 2 dimensions. This way and this way. Left to right, up and down. A column reference and a row reference. Only 2 directions. So if you want to convert this to a locked cell reference, no matter where you copy the formula, it's going to, in essence, be locked on B11. Or the term that Microsoft uses is absolute. It means wherever I copy it, absolutely it's always going to be locked on B11. You got to put a $ in front of the B. That says, hey, column reference, you are not allowed to move. And then a $ reference in front of the 11. That means row reference, you are never going to be allowed to move. Now, what I just did, we will never do again. We don't have to type those $signs. I'm going to hit backspace and backspace. All you got to do is if your cursor is touching somewhere, anywhere, next to this cell reference or in the middle of it, hit the F4 key. F4 key puts the $2 signs in. Now, this is just arbitrary. Way back at the beginning of spreadsheets, they just picked a symbol that they would slap in here, and it would distinguish between a relative and an absolute cell reference. So the $ is arbitrary. But now we have our B, which is column reference, and 11, which is row reference locked. When we copy this, that B11, that green box, is not going to move down, and it's not going to move to the side. Control Enter. I'm going to double click and send it down. And then this is a two-step process when you're copying it to a whole table of values, which I like to call a sea of formulas. It's down, double click, let go of your mouse, and then re-grab it. The big mistake that people make, I'm going to Control ZZ, is they go like this. And they're not letting go. They're trying to oh, wait a second. How come it doesn't go to the whole table? It's two steps. Double click, send it down, and then click and drag. All right, now how do you check? Because now, but before we always went to the end and checked our formula to see if it was correct, right? But here we have a whole sea of formulas. Well, diagonally, the furthest cell across from this starting cell where we created our formula, that's the one you have to check. So I'm going to click there and hit F2. Is that not beautiful? Instead of typing in every single one of these cell references individually, we put one formula, copied it down and over, and boom, perfect formula. It's looking at the right price. It's looking at the rate for us, the 1 plus the percentage change. All right, now I got to show you another great trick. Highlight this whole table, and what's the keyboard shortcut for delete? Remember, it's not right-click delete because you can get into trouble with that. That can delete cells and it moves everything up. The keyboard shortcut is, of course, delete. Delete just removes the content, not the formatting. Now, I got to show you a great trick. If you have a sea of formulas, instead of creating an individual formula and copying it down and over in two steps, if you have the whole range highlighted in advance, notice the active cell is the light colored cell, and all the remaining ones are dark. If you put your formula in the active cell and hold Control and tap Enter, it'll populate all the cells with the formula. So let's try it. In the active cell equals 3 cells to my left times B11. Well, that's not B11. That's 3 over and 8 down relative to me. So what do? You hit the F4 key to $sign in front of the column reference, $sign in front of the row reference. We have our formula, and this is red, equals 3 cells to my left times B11. Now hold Control and tap Enter. Now, earlier in the class, we saw that typing something in a cell and using Control Enter, it just puts the thing in the cell and keeps the cell selected. But much different and totally cool if you have a sea of cells selected, whatever's in that active cell, whether a word or a formula, boom, Control Enter populates everything. Now, got to show you, if you're doing this, there's a great way to immediately check or jump to this cell. If you use Control period, notice what Control period does. It jumps between the edges of the selected area. So I usually Control Enter, Control period, period, and then F2 to edit, to verify or audit this to make sure that it's correct. And if you're in charge of the spreadsheet, you always want to do that. Enter your formula, check the diagonally furthest one away. All right, so in this video, or in this example here, we just saw relative and absolute. Now, I'm going to click Escape. I'm going to go over to CR3. Now we want to talk about mixed cell references. Oh, here's sales rep, sales, oh, and commissions. Oh, we love it when we get commissions. It looks like 0.04, or if we were to format it, that would be 4%. So here's the formula. I'm going to zoom way in. By the way, how can we tell how many rows down this table goes? I'm going to click here and do Control down arrow. Oh, so row 52. Control home jumps back to A1. All right, I'm going to click right here. My formula is going to be equals one cell to my left, because as I copy this down, I want to move to the next cells, times B2. Now, let's just take a look at this. I want to make a mistake. I want to enter this, Control Enter, and I want to copy it down. Now, B2 is what I want. I really want that locked all the way down this column. Escape. I'm going to copy it down just one. Click here and hit F2. I can't emphasize how cool it is that you can put it into edit mode, and this range finder will help you when you're having trouble creating your formulas with cell references. That green box, we can clearly see it's looking at 0. So what do we want? When we copied it down, it changed to B3, but what we really wanted it to say was B2. So that green box needs to be up there. Escape, delete, up arrow, F2. All right, so what's the, Control ZZ, Control Y. I actually want to keep that there. See the B2? What changed, the B or the 2? The 2 changed to 3. Now, when you're copying down a column, it's the row reference that matters. Now, notice this is the second row. And as we copy it down, it means relative to me, I'm always going to look 1, 2, 3, 4 above. But that's not what we want. We want it locked on what? Row 2. So the one way to learn which one of the dollar signs is required is to hit F2. The B2, F2, change to B3. So it is the number that is moving, and we don't want it to move. Notice the B doesn't move because it doesn't matter. If you're copying it down, the relationship between C and B is never going to change. So I'm going to delete, come up here, F2. And it's just the dollar sign in front of that 2 that is needed. We need to stop the 2 from moving. So I'm going to hit F4. Now, last time we only hit F4 once. What happens if you hit F4 a second time? That's exactly what we want. We want that dollar sign in front of the row reference. Now, this is the first time we've seen the F4 key as a toggle. So I want you to hit F4 again. Oh, in front of the column. F4 again, back to relative. I'm hitting F4, F4, F4. It's like a merry-go-round, merry-going rounding through the different cell references. So relative, absolute, row locked, row absolute, column not, column relative, F4, column locked only. All right, so that's how the F4 key works. For us, we know we want to stop the 2 from moving. So Control Enter and double click and send it down. Now, notice we want to go to the bottom and verify. You can either use Control period or Control down arrow. Control period keeps everything selected. If you Control period again, it jumps back up. If I Control down arrow, it just jumps and doesn't keep it selected. Now I'm going to hit F2. Did that work? Is that not totally awesome? B50, oh, one cell to my left times locked when I'm copying down across the rows on B2. Now I'm going to escape, Control home. All right, that's our first time we've seen a mixed cell reference. Now, at this point in the video, I do have to just make a note here. If we had left this, and I'm going to put it in edit mode and touch my cursor somewhere to the green one. If I hit F4 and lock both the column and the row, Control Enter. By the way, double clicking replaces all the formulas. Control down arrow and F2. Notice that works. Control up arrow. I'm going to click here, hit F2. Now I'm going to be mean here, and I'm going to require that you, at least in my classes I'm going to require that you always put the minimum number of dollar signs, right? So in this case, we're never copying across the column, and we don't care if it moved anyway, because we're only copying it down. So I'm only putting the minimum number of dollar signs required into the formula. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Now the reason why, and even for myself, I adopted this policy many years ago is because if I'm always thinking the minimum number of dollar signs that are required, then when I get to a formula that really requires it, or some hard formula where there's lots of cell references, I'm already thinking in that direction. So by always putting the minimum number of dollar signs in, then you're always going to get the right type of cell reference for the more complicated formulas. All right, let's go over and look at our next example. I'm on the CR4. Now, we looked at this sheet in our last video, but I want to scroll up. And our example is right here. You know what? I just realized I made a mistake. I got confused. This is the place where there's a 1.5. I'm going to go back over here to CR2. Now, the beauty of Excel, of course, is what? You can just change this to, now I don't remember what it was. Was it 1? Oh, maybe 1.05. I suppose we could go look on the page in the book. Let's go look. So it looks like yep. So it's 1.05, which means we increased all of these by 5%. OK. Now, here's our situation. We have some revenue, January through June. Now, January was 20K, or we've estimated that it's going to be 20K, and we just want to increase each successive month by 0.015, or if we were to add a percent, it would be 1.5%. All right, so what's our formula? Equals, well, whatever last month's revenue was, that'll be a relative cell reference. So when we get to March, it's looking to February. June's looking to May. Times, and then I'm going to click on this. Now, remember, the 1, this means it's an increase, right? Because it's 1 and some amount bigger than, it's a number bigger than 1. That 1 represents the original principal, and that extra decimal represents the percentage increase. All right, so that'll work. Control Enter. Beautiful. Now let's copy it over one. Oh, what's that? That's accounting format. I actually didn't mention that in the earlier video. Accounting format, if you have 0, and I'll show you here, 0, and then we add an accounting format. Actually, we'll go here. Accounting format always shows 0 as a dash. That comes from accounting. When I teach basic accounting, we always have to put a little dash when the account is cleared and it shows a 0 balance. All right, I'm going to delete that. All right, so I'm going to hit F2 here. Is our formula correct? No, look at this. The C2 is correct because it's really one cell to my left, but that C4, that green box is looking in the wrong place. It's supposed to be locked on what? B4. Escape. Click here, F2. The B4 changed to C4. So the B changed to a C, and I didn't want the B to change to a C. So that tells me the dollar sign has to go in front of the column reference. Now, escape, delete, click here, F2. So once your cursor is touching that cell reference somewhere, you can use the F4 key 1, 2, 3 times. I want that B to not move. So I want it to stay, as I move the formula across the columns, I'm moving it across the columns. I want it locked on B. Now, we don't need the row one because we're never going to copy it down. We're not worried about that. And another way to think about that is if I'm copying here, I'm in row 2, right? Well, the relationship between 2 and 4 never changes if I'm only copying this direction. Control Enter and drag it over. Click in the last cell or Control period, F2. There we have it. Now Control period back. Notice it's a toggle. It goes between the edges. If you wanted to not keep it highlighted but just jump to the end, you'd use Control right arrow and then F2. Notice it works fine. Absolutely beautiful. The month from before times locked on B4. Now again, the same situation arises in this formula. If I had locked both of them and copied it over, the formula would work. But I always tend to put the minimum number of dollar signs in, so when I get to the tough formulas, I'm already thinking like that. Escape. All right, let's go over to our next sheet, cell reference 5. Ooh, this is a great example here because guess what? We're going to use a bunch of different types of cell references in one formula. Now, so far, we used mixed and relative. On sheet 3, we used relative and mixed with the row locked, right? Over on C2, we used F2, relative and absolute. So in each formula example so far, we used 2 different types of cell references. Now on CR5, no problem. We're going to use a bunch of different cell references in one formula. Now, in this video, we're going to use the future value function. Now, we're not going to worry so much about what the future value function does or how it calculates. We want to use this example just to learn about cell references. Now, later in the book, I promise you I'll teach you more about the future value function. All right, so here's our situation. This is a table, and there are some variables or formula inputs that are row headers. Now, we talked a little bit about this earlier in this book and in the videos when we talked about pivot tables, right? But here, we're going to do a formula. But notice row headers. That means anywhere in this row, when I calculate my pension value, what it will be worth when I'm retired, this is the 30-year row. So all of these calculations will be calculated using a 30-year. That means we'll put money into our pension for 30 years. Right? Now, these are column headers. These are going to be the formula inputs for each column. So in this column, when I'm at 30 years, I'm going to assume I'm going to calculate my pension based on the fact that I put payments in for 30 years, and there's an 8% return per year. In this column here, 30 years, 9%. So formula inputs, column headers, formula inputs, row headers. And actually, this is quite common setup. There's one other input that will go in, right? If we're putting money in for 30 years, how much are we putting in? Now, this formula assumes that there is a constant amount. This is technically called an annuity. We put an equal amount in. And actually, in finance, there's lots of annuities. There's lots of other types of cash flow patterns too, but annuities are certainly one of them. All right, I'm going to zoom in. We're not using this. These assumptions were used to create these labels. And you can play around that if you want. For example, if you change the beginning 7%, then that changes to 7%. And all of these add that little increment. Now I'm going to Control Z. All we want to look at is this formula here. Now I'm going to try and zoom. Oh, no, I don't think this will let me zoom in anymore. We're already pretty much zoomed in as much as we can. But no problem. I'm going to zoom in more because I want to zoom in on this cell right here. Now, in this video, we're not going to do that trick where we create the formula and copy it over and look at what changes. We're going to learn a more robust way to figure out what types of cell references. And if you go back to the book on the first couple pages, these 2 questions are what we're going to use for this formula. And this is ultimately what you want to do when you're creating your own formulas. All right, we're going to type out future value. The rate is going to be this, comma, the NPER, that's the number of periods, is going to be this, comma, the PMT, that's the periodic payment. And we're going to do it, you pay at the end of each year. And these last 2 arguments we don't need. In a finance class, we would consider those. But that's all we need. And actually, if you'd enter it right here, it tells you, oh, minus. And you can tell from our earlier study of number formatting, that parenthesis is not really in the cell. It's a negative. But wait a second. If we put money in to an account and we're saving up, is it a subtraction at the end? No. So I want to come up here for finance functions, which we'll talk about later. Anytime you have an amount that you're giving to your pension fund or you're putting into a savings account, it's always a subtraction because how much comes out of your wallet and into the savings account or retirement plan? it's a minus. This is coming out of your wallet or purse. So I'm going to put this as a minus. Now that's got a format. That just means negative. You could change it if you want. Control 1. Currency. Oh, how nice is it? Currency, we have some choice. Click OK. All right, now I'm going to hit F2, and I want to look at 3 cell references. And the way these questions work is you have, if for each cell reference, you ask 2 questions. Now, why only 2 questions? Because there's only 2 directions in Excel. Remember back at the beginning of the book, I mentioned that is just one of the fundamental aspects of Excel, and it's going to help us here when we're learning about cell references. Now, I'm just going to pick one direction, down. That'll be the first question, and then over. Because look, we're copying it down and then over. It doesn't matter in which order you ask these questions. You could ask the question, hey, what's going to happen when I copy it this way? And the second question would be down. But I'm going to pick down. So that B4, that's the rate. When I copy this formula down across the rows, do I want it locked on that 6%? Or do I want it to move relatively? Hey, when I get down here to this cell, I want it locked on that 6%. So the answer is I want it locked when I go down across the rows or numbers. Now, the way I memorize this is I said, well, if I'm going down and I literally hold my finger and I go, hey, I'm going across numbers. If I want it locked and I'm going down across numbers, then it tells me put the $ in front of the 4. I hit the F4 key twice. The row reference is locked. Now, the second question, since we just did it down, now do it this way. When I go over to the C column and then the D column, do I want it locked on the 6%? Or do I want that blue box to move? Now, in this case, when I come over here, I want it to move to the new column header formula input. So no $ in front of the B. I want that B to move when I go this way. But I don't want the 4 to move when I go down. All right. First cell reference, we asked 2 questions. Now, go to the next cell reference, and we ask the same 2 questions. All right, you ready? When I go down this column, do I want it locked on the 5? Which means when I'm down in the 25-year row, do I want it locked on the 5, or do I want that green box to move down to 25? I want it to move. So I want it relative as I go down. So no $. Second question, when I copy over to the 7% column and the 8% column, do I want it locked on the 5 years? Yes, I do. In essence, think about it this way. Moving this way, well, of course, it's got to be locked on the row header formula input. So I always think of it this way. I know I want this locked, and I'm holding my finger, and I'm saying, what is my finger moving across? I want it locked as I move across the letters, so it's got to go in front of the letter, the $. So I hit F4 1, 2, 3 times. All right. 1, 2, the third cell reference. OK, 2 questions. When I copy down, do I want it locked on that 3,000? Yeah, I don't want that purple box to move down. So I'm going to F4 twice and lock the row reference. My fingers moving across the numbers, and I know I want it locked, so $'s got to go in front of the number. Second question about this. When I copy it this way, do I want the purple box to move? No way. So this is an example of where I want both the column and the row locked. So I'm going to hit F4 until I get to my absolute. And really, some people just immediately try to jump to the conclusion. And all the years I've been teaching this, that is the mistake. When you're trying to learn in a hard formula like this, what different cell references you need, just slow down and ask the 2 questions. Even if you think you know the answer, ask 2 questions. And that's what we did here. We asked 2 questions. We got the right type of cell reference. Asked 2 questions, got the right type of cell reference. Asked 2 questions, got the right type of cell references. Now, Control Enter. And I'm going to hold my Control and roll the wheel. Double click and send it down. And then this is a 2-step process, and then copy it all the way over. Now I'm going to Control period and F2. You've got to be kidding me. That is absolutely as beautiful a formula as you will ever see. We did a whole sea of formulas. And look at that. The blue one's looking perfectly. The green one's looking perfectly. And that purple one is looking perfectly up there also. Again, you could use your one step where you highlight in advance. Here, I'll cheat. I'll copy this in edit mode. Delete. Active cell, F2. Let's just pretend I created my formula that fast. I want to populate all of these. Control Enter. Control period, period, F2. Beautiful. All right, one more example. And this is on CR6. And this example here is exactly, it's actually taught in most textbooks to learn, for people to learn how to do mixed cell references. But I tell you what, even though this is a standard problem, I actually, when I first learned Excel, and I was trying to, in my job, remember how to do mixed cell references, and I was having such a hard time, I just quickly go whip out this example, and I would remind myself how mixed cell references work. Now, what's so nice about this example is we all remember from whenever we learn multiplication table that any intersecting cell here is simply the column header 7 times the row header 6. And so for any one of these cells, boom, we have our formula inputs in columns, formula inputs in rows. So I'm going to actually zoom way in, click in this cell. Actually, I'm going to highlight all the way to the end. Hey, here's a cool trick. If I have this cell highlighted and I really want to highlight the whole table, instead of dragging, let's say, because that means I have to go like this, so I have to go diagonally and over. That takes a little bit longer than this. Watch this. Hold Shift, click diagonally. I'm holding Shift before I click. The whole table is highlighted. Now I'm going to zoom way in. And I promise you, I did this the first 6 months that I was trying to permanently remember how to do mixed cell references. I did this table at least 10 times. All right, you ready? Equals the column header times the row header. Now, it doesn't matter in which order you do this. You could do row header times column header because multiplication is commutative. 2 times 1 is the same as 1 times 2. Now I'm going to pick one of these. All right, this one. When I copy over this direction, do I want it locked on that 1 or do I want it to move relatively? I want it to move relatively. This formula, when it gets over here, has got to be looking at the 2. So no $ in front of that letter. What about when I go down? When I go down, do all of these formulas down here have to be locked on the number 1? Yes. And I'm going across numbers as I copy down, so the $ has to go F4, F4 in front of the row reference. Click here, second cell reference. When I copy this way, do I want B4 locked on 1 or do I want it to move relatively? Hey, I want it locked because when I get over to this cell, and this cell, it's got to be looking at the row header. So I'm going to hit F4, F4, F4 3 times to lock the column reference. Now think about this. I want it locked and I'm moving across the columns. So that tells me put the $ in front of the B. Now, second question for this second cell reference when I copy it down. Do I want it locked on the 1 or do I want it to move from 1 to 2 to 3? I want it to move. So no $ in front of that row reference. Now I'm going to populate all of these cells. Control Enter. Control period, period. Actually, I'm going to zoom out. All right, you ready? F2. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that. The formula input that is the column header and the formula input that is the row header are looking at exactly the right place. Now later we will have some videos where our formula inputs are not technically sitting at the top of the column, but they'll be down in an assumption table. And we'll see how to build our formulas for those also. All right, I think that's our last one. Yeah, that's our last one. That was an epic video about how to teach yourself and learn and remember forever the 4 types of cell references: relative, absolute, mixed with the column lock, mixed with the row lock. And I cannot emphasize enough that literally knowing those 4 cell references is oftentimes the dividing line between being really good in Excel and just ordinary. And we will see, as you study Excel more, you'll see not only do formulas use all 4 types of cell references, but also conditional formatting and other features in Excel require for advanced tricks to really know those 4 types of cell references. All right, I cannot wait. We'll see you next video.